You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com. Bitcoin, Ether, Ripple, Litecoin, and more. Cryptocurrencies and other digital assets are taking the financial world by storm. This exploding market provides everything a savvy trader needs: volatility, volume, and liquidity. Provided you know how to find it. That's where we come in. Welcome to the Crypto Rundown. Each week, we'll break down the latest trading activity, trends, and developments on everything from coins to tokens, futures, and even OTC options. If it's moving the crypto markets, then you'll find it on the Crypto Rundown. This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. Now it's time to dive into the exploding world of cryptocurrencies and digital assets. It's time for the Crypto Rundown.
All right, everybody. That music means it is time once again for the Crypto Rundown, the program here on the Options Insider Radio Network, where we go above and beyond our usual areas of interest. Not going to look at just, the SPYs or your VIXs or your hot B-Bigs and all the options on all that fun stuff. We're going to move a little bit farther afield, see what's hot in the ever-evolving, ever-volatile, ever-interesting world of crypto derivatives. Going to talk, of course, the volume, the volatility, the SKEW, the OI, the unusual activity, what's going on in the underlying, and a whole bunch more. My name is Mark Longo from theoptionsinsider.com. As well as, of course, from the aforementioned network. Reminding you, of course, for all our legion of on-demand listeners, if you like what you hear, keep rating and reviewing. This could be either in the Crypto Rundown feed or indeed on the network feed. And the network's been around for a long, long time. Crypto Rundown, a little bit newer addition to the network. But you could argue the most recent reviews are really even more important these days than ever. So if you like what you hear, keep rating and reviewing. We really are kind of the only game in town when it comes to talking about crypto derivatives. For some reason, it's not an area that has really, I think it's too much of a leap for a lot of people. They're already taking a leap into crypto. Then to go into the derivatives beyond that, it's just too terrifying for them. So don't worry. We'll ease you into it. We'll walk you down. We'll slowly lure you to the dark side of the crypto derivatives. Of course, if you want to go above and beyond, join us for this show live, everything else that we do live throughout the week. Great pro Q&A sessions, great options oddity shows, giveaways, a whole bunch more. TheOptionsInsider.com is the place to go /secret club. Just access to all the fun stuff we're doing over there. And of course, however you listen on demand, if you listen in live, however you get the shows, make sure you keep sending in those questions, those comments. We do have to hear from all of you folks out there. And let's see what we've got lighting it up on the old program today. It is time to dive into the Bitcoin breakdown.
It's time to explore the latest trending activity, trends, and developments across the world's leading crypto market. It's time for the Bitcoin breakdown.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Bitcoin breakdown, the portion of the show where we do just that. We break down the week that was and indeed still is, from a Bitcoin trading and trending and volatility and all sorts of fun perspectives. And coming into showtime, we're seeing Bitcoin back north of that 40K level, actually just flirting with the 41K level, 41,004 to be precise when we kicked off the show. On our last show, of course, we were shy of the 40K level at about 38,500 and change. So we have seen a nice little rally, almost 2,500, about 2,468 on Bitcoin since our last show. Had a little bit wider range beyond that. Hit a high of about 42,245 or so. That was on Saturday. And the low for the week came not that long after our show last week on Tuesday, 38,383. Of course, we've seen Bitcoin whipping around as the broad markets have been whipped around, buffeted by a number of different factors. Of course, what's going on with Ukraine. The Fed was a big driver last week. So a lot of things have been conspiring to move the major markets. And of course, Bitcoin gets caught up with that quite a bit. Let's get out to the vol side now. By the way, this vol, everything we're going to talk about here on the show today, brought to you by our friends over there at Genesis Volatility, aka gvol.io. That's the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires, not just on these analytics, but everything they have cooking over there. There's a whole bunch of stuff. We really do just scratch the surface on the analytical offerings over there at gvol.io. So if you are even remotely intrigued by these markets, you owe it to yourselves. Head on over there to kick the tires and light the fires. If you did that, you would see a lot of their different metrics, including they take a nice average representative sampling of the at-the-money vol out there across the term structure in Bitcoin options on Deribit. If you did that, you'd see that vol has come in markedly over the course of the past week, about 10 points. It was hovering around a 76 on our last show. Today's show, 66. Now you're starting to get into the lower end of recent Bitcoin vol range. You know, that you're talking now a decently volatile equity is the 66 vol. You know, that's nothing crazy, nothing to write home about. You're not even talking about your fun, your B-Bigs, your Rockets, all of those, of course, meme stock 2.0 type names that would see astronomical level of volatility. We're not even seeing that. So Bitcoin has been synonymous with volatility for a lot of people for quite some time. I'd argue maybe they don't listen to the show if they still view it that way. But Bitcoin vol has been trending lower for quite some time, and it has trended aggressively lower over this past week, down to 66%. Let's take a different snapshot of that. Let's go out, look at a rolling 30-day measure of vol, which is, of course, analogous to what VIX does. Effectively, that's our buddy, Mr. Simon Ho over there. He generates this BitVol, which is effectively the Bitcoin VIX. That has also come in quite a bit as well. It was an 83 on our last show, 76 this show as well. So kind of across the board, you can see the direction for Bitcoin volatility is lower. And let's see, looking at the SKEW, let's see, similar reduction in SKEW as well. Our last show, we were still pretty markedly negative, about a negative 3.3. Coming into today's show, just slightly negative, about a 1.3. So that SKEW has come up about 2 points there. So we're seeing a whole lot of squeezing out of the juice in the Bitcoin options out there this week. And that, of course, reflected out there in Simon's other index he likes to disseminate out there, which is his BitSKEW, which measures the 25 delta puts and 25 delta calls on the options over there on Deribit and puts them together for one index. If you don't know what any of that means, all the deltas and the SKEW and all that stuff, volatility, if any of these terms are confusing to you, make sure A, you're subscribed to our full network, because there's a lot of great shows that will help you through that. And B, in particular, you should be checking out our Options Bootcamp, Options Playbook radio programs. Those two shows are really designed for newer entrants to the options market, help you get up to speed so you can start using some of these terms and understanding them the way we throw them around here on a show like this. But the BitSKEW this week has come in a little bit as well. It was about a 94 in our last show, about a 92 this week. So again, the overall trend across the board is lower when it comes to Bitcoin this week, except for price. Price obviously higher. And again, that's reflective of what we've seen out there across the board. Let's see what we're seeing from an OI perspective. Let's dive into that. That's always interesting. See if we've seen any really new additions to the open interest out there since our last show. And again, it's kind of been middling at best, I would say, this past week. 127,000 contracts are open on the call side on Deribit right now. It's up about 5,000 from this time last week. The puts are at about 60, almost 61, about 60,750 or so. That's up about 1,400 from this time last week. So seeing puts actually ticking up this week. It's been a while since we've seen that. So we'll see. We're still obviously short of that 2-to-1 level a lot of people like to watch out there. Speaking of watching, let's see where you folks are lining up from an expiration perspective, where are you putting on your trades right now? It does seem like March is still leading the dance out there by a pretty sizable margin. There's about 71,000 contracts open, almost 72, about 71.6 thousand contracts open out there in the March expiration cycle. It's up about 5,000 contracts from this time last week. So you folks still like some near-dated paper, which it's understandable. It has been moving a bit, even if the vol is coming in. June is number 2 at 42,000. So we're keeping things in that quarterly expiration cycle that you folks all clearly love so much. You really love it in ETH, but you're starting to really like it in Bitcoin as well. That's up about 1,000 contracts from this time last week. And then a newcomer to our top 3 this week, we have April sneaking in there with 26,000 contracts. So a distant number 3, but number 3 nonetheless. Let's go on out to the top positions. What's open? What are the size positions that are open right now in Bitcoin options? Let's start from the bottom and work our way up, leave a little bit of mystery for the top there. Number 5, 40,000 strike, the 40K strike. That has about 9,600 contracts open. That's actually down 1,400 contracts from this time last week. Last week, there was a tie, I believe, between the 40K and the 70K strike. This week, they have separated themselves. Number 4 is the 70K strike. It has about 9,700 contracts. So they are close. Only 100 contracts separating them this week. The 70K strike is up about 500 contracts. So it has gained a little bit new paper. And number 3 is the 30K strike with 11,000 contracts, up about 1,200 contracts in this time last week. Number 2, 60,000. So now we're getting a little bit more optimistic out there with 16,000 contracts open this week. That is unchanged from this time last week. And number 1 is the 50K strike with 17,000 contracts opens up about 2,000 contracts from this time last week. So all in all, a fairly representative sampling of quasi-relevant strikes. I mean, you get a little bit out there with the 70,000 strike, obviously, but 70,000, 60,000, then 50,000, then 40,000, then 30,000. You have pretty much a whole strip right there. But again, it is a market change from what we saw back even in December, when it was all par strikes and above pretty much that were dominating the open interest out there. So when you're comparing the 70,000 strike to, let's say, the 200,000 strike, it does look a lot more relevant by comparison. Let's see what was the biggest day in terms of options volume over the course of the past week. That was on the 16th with about 23,600 contracts going up on Deribit last Wednesday. And that was, again, the biggest day. But when we look back on some active days out there, that isn't a heck of a lot of paper. We've seen days with 28,000 contracts very easily, 37,000 contracts going up on the 24th of January. So when we compare it to some recent days, not a ton, but it's more than some other days we talked about. We saw 18, almost 19,000 going up on the show a few weeks ago. That was the busiest day we saw. So it's somewhere in the middle. It's not blowing the doors off, but it's not nothing either when it comes to overall volume. Let's see what's going on over there on the CME front. Maybe we can find some volume this week. It's been kind of quiet over there the last couple of weeks. And we are seeing a little bit of action out there. Not a ton, about 160 contracts going up in the Bitcoin options at CME on Friday. It doesn't sound like a lot, but again, if you've been listening to this show for a while, following this product for a while, you know, it's actually a decent amount. It never really blew the doors off. The OI also trending in the right direction finally as well. It's up about 300 contracts to a little bit shy of 2,000 out there. So not a ton, but it's something out there. The futures, I think you could describe them about the same way. Not a ton of paper, but there's something going on out there. About 6,000 going up on Friday. That's pretty light for this product. We've seen it do many, many multiples of that in the past. The OI, though, ticking up in the right direction, up about 2,000 contracts to about 12,000 right now. Let's see the micro side. That's where I know where a lot of you are much more interested, and much more relevant product for a lot of you. The micro Bitcoin futures got the options coming soon. Got CME coming on our TWIFO program soon to discuss the launch of the micro Bitcoin and micro Ether options. So I know a lot of you will be looking forward to that. The OI on the micro Bitcoin futures shooting up quite a bit this week, up about 8,000 contracts to 22,000. That had kind of fallen off a cliff a few weeks ago. Now starting to trend back in the right direction. We saw a decent paper on Friday, about 17,000 contracts. That's kind of about average for what we see out there. So nothing blowing the doors off, but not nothing either out there on the micro Bitcoin futures. Again, everyone probably playing the wait and see game for the new micro options coming soon. But you know what? You don't have to wait and see anymore, listeners, to see what's going on in the altcoin universe.
It's time to move beyond Bitcoin and find out what's moving the rest of the crypto marketplace. It's time to boldly venture into the altcoin universe.
All right, everybody, let's do it. Let's dive into the altcoin universe, see what's lighting things up. First, Let's go out to a little bit of market cap action. Look at the top 10 out there across the broad spectrum of the crypto markets. See what the top assets are from a market cap perspective. Again, take these overall market caps with a pretty sizable grain of salt. There's a lot of skullduggery that goes into these numbers, but overall, rankings-wise and trends-wise, they are worthy of analysis. This week, yet again, number 10 is Avalanche, so maintaining its lock on the number 10 spot there with about 23.1 billion worth of market cap. Number 9, Solana at about 28.1 billion worth of market cap. That one's had some action, to put it mildly, out there of late. We'll get to all that a little bit later. Cardano, another one that's been lighting up people's tapes of late. Interest, been trending on Twitter. It's good for about 30, almost 31 billion worth of market cap right now. Number 7, good old Luna at about 35 billion. Number 6, XRP. We keep saying, when are we going to get our resolution to this thing? XRP, people are probably waiting for that as well. Hovering right around almost 40 billion, 39.75 billion worth of market cap. Number 5, USD coin, 52, almost 53 billion. Number 4, good old BNB at about 65.6 billion. Number 3, it's Tether, hanging out at 80.6 billion. Numero due out there, it's ETH at about 350.25 billion. And number 1, Bitcoin, a little bit bigger this week at about 779 billion worth of market cap. Let's get out there to the number 2 altcoin. Number 1 in a lot of your hearts, it is, of course, ETH. Coming into showtime, we are seeing a bit of upside back on the screens at about a 29.19 when we kicked off the show. That's up almost exactly 400 handles from our last show. We had about 25.22 this time last week. That's pretty much emblematic of the range as well. We got a little bit higher on the upside, almost at 3,000 level, 29.75. And the low was pretty much right during our show last week, right around 25.17. So that's pretty much our range for the week. And that's kind of reflected in the vol as well. Remember, I said the vol was coming off pretty aggressively in Bitcoin options. We're seeing the same thing in ETH options, over 10 points. We came off 10 points in Bitcoin options, came off 11 points in ETH options over the course of the past week. We had about an 85 on the show last week, 74 this week. So a lot of vol coming in across the board out there. SKEW-wise, kind of a similar trend to what we saw in Bitcoin as well. Markedly negative last week, nearly -7, about -6.8 this week. That has come in about -3.6 again as we're rallying away from some of those puts. That makes a certain amount of sense out there. Speaking of the puts, let's see what's going on from an open interest perspective. This week, there are 1.4 million calls open on Deribit from an ETH options perspective. That's up about 20,000 contracts in this time last week. As for the puts, those are actually ticking up a bit as well this week, up to 587,000 contracts, up about 42,000 contracts. Still pretty distant number 2. You got to go almost 3x to catch up there, but still interesting stuff. Puts starting to add some more OI out there. In terms of action, what did we see over the course of the past week? Looks like our busiest day was March 18th, about 199,000 contracts. That's decent paper. It's nothing blowing the doors off, though. We saw pretty much double that not too long ago. Back on that day I mentioned earlier for Bitcoin, January 24th, we saw 402,000 contracts going up. So that's pretty much exactly half of that. So not nothing, but it's not exactly blowing the doors off either. In terms of where you folks are lining up from an expiration perspective, let's run down the list here. March, dominating the tape once again here in Bitcoin options with 726,000 contracts open. It's up about 11,000 from this time last week. June, number 2, a distant number 2, only 474,000 contracts. That's also up 11,000 from this time last week. And April, also breaking into the top 3 for the first time here in ETH this week with 236,000. So we kind of fall off a cliff after March, but still pretty much mostly quarterlies and a little bit of April seasoning sprinkled in there on the top. Let's look at the size positions. Where are you folks lining up right now from an ETH options perspective? Start from the bottom again. Number 5 is the 10,000 strike. That has 99,000 contracts open. It's up about 2,000 from this time last week. Number 4, we have the 15,000 strike, so getting even more outlandish. That has 106,000 contracts open. That's pretty much unched from this time last week. Number 3 is the 20,000 strike. That has 111,000 contracts open. That's also unched from this time last week. So we've gone 10,000, 15,000, 20,000. Let's see what else we have dominating the top of our list here. Number 2, back to a more relevant strike, the 4,000 strike. That has about 129,000 contracts open, up about 11,000 from this time last week. And the number one size position out there in ETH options right now, it is the 5K strike. It has about 132,000 contracts open. That's up a whopping 1,000 contracts from this time last week. So the bottom half of our top five kind of dominated by those, shall we say, optimistic strikes. Then we get to the more relevant stuff as we get to the top of the list. Let's see what's going on over there at CME from a ETH perspective. The futures first, the big futures, not a big day on Friday, almost 4,000, going up about 3,800. The OI pretty much hanging out about unched at 3,200 contracts out there. It's not a huge change. Again, folks waiting for the micro options. The micro ETH futures also reflecting that. These launched obviously back on December 6th. So until the options launch, these are the newest addition to the CME crypto offerings there. We saw almost 15,000 going up on Friday, about 14,800. And the OI ticking up about 1,500 contracts to about 25,000. So that's a decent clip for the micro ETH futures. Good to see a little bit more OI showing up there ahead of the options launch, which is coming pretty soon. Let's go on out now to the rest of the altcoin landscape, see what's going on out there. And again, for the most part, pretty much a lift across the board, as kind of following in the footsteps of what we saw in the broad equity markets towards the latter half of last week as well. Everything kind of got a lift post-Fed out there. Last show, XRP was at about a 75.5 cents this week, 82.5, so up about 7 cents this week. Good old Doge also getting a bit of a lift, also up almost a full cent. Not quite. Threatening the 12-cent level as we speak, but not quite there. Litecoin was at a 101, almost 102 on our last show. This week, 116.25, so a nice bounce. 14 and about a third over the course of the past week. Cardano on our last show, 78.5 cents. This week, 91.5 cents. So a nice pop there, about 13 cents there. Polkadot, similar move. We got about 17.20 on our last show, almost 18.90 coming into today's shows, up about $1.70 there. Solana last show, 78.72. This week, 88.12, up about $9.40 over the course of the past week. Again, kind of a nice rising tide lifts all boats. Even Shiba Inu managing to tick up a meager 0.00002 over the course of the past week. So all you waiting for the Shiba Lambos, unfortunately, got to wait another week. You don't have to wait any longer to get your questions answered. It is time for the crypto questions.
You've got questions about crypto. Who doesn't? It's time to find out the answers to your crypto questions.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Crypto Questions, the portion of the show where you guys send in your questions and we endeavor to answer them. And we'll kick things off here. A little bit of love, a little comment here from Jan. Jan says, thank you for this program. I find the world of crypto derivatives very interesting and look forward to new episodes of this rundown every week. Well, we're happy to do it for you, Jan, out there. You're right. It is a very interesting marketplace. I'm still surprised that more folks haven't really started talking about it. It does seem like it is kind of the lesser heralded, but obviously clearly very important aspect of the crypto markets. You got 1 million people out there talking about the spot and all these other things. Much smaller number talking about the futures and virtually no one talking about the options. When they do, they throw out things like notional premium amounts and all sorts of other really useless metrics. So yeah, we're happy to do it for you folks. We like really carving a niche in this space, and it certainly is one that seems to have intrigued a lot of you out there. So we're happy to do it. It's always fun for us to kind of bring in new people to the network, people who maybe traditionally wouldn't have discovered our content before. Now they're coming from, people who are out there actively mining these and looking for things to use the derivatives for as a hedge or as a way to generate some income. And so people who obviously maybe otherwise never would have discovered our network are learning about it through a show like this. So we're very happy to do it. Glad you're enjoying it out there, Jan. Let's go on out to another question here. This comes from Anders. Anders wants to know, have you noticed any interesting changes to LEDGERX post-acquisition? LEDGERX, yes, now known as FTX US Derivatives. That's probably the first big change there, Anders. They finalized the deal. FTX obviously acquired them, and they finalized that acquisition back on October 25th of last year. So now if you head on over to what used to be LEDGERX, you'll now go to FTX US Derivatives. And it has been quite a substantial overhaul. I do need to kind of dig into it a little bit more myself. I think we need to get them back on the show as well to kind of, now that they're post-acquisition a little bit, they can talk about it a little bit more freely. Usually when firms are in the middle of being acquired or acquiring someone. They can't really talk about it a lot, but we wanted to give them a little bit of time, a little bit of distance. But now that we have that, I think it will be good to bring the LEDGERX / FTX US derivatives folks. They've been on a few times. Bring them back on to discuss what their plans are. Obviously, a big firm, FTX, with some deep pockets, acquiring them. That could be a good thing for a lot of you out there who wanted a little bit more out of their options markets in terms of liquidity and offerings and even simple things like auto exercise. I think we'll start seeing all of those things. Overall, right now, just the coat of paint on the site outside of the name, which is obviously different, does look a lot different. They're obviously going for an interesting audience. They're trying to hit on the educational aspect up front, which I do like. I do applaud them for it. If you go to their website right now, they have intros on things like risk reversals, which is the first thing up there, which I probably would have started with something else, going straight to the risk reversal. Okay, I'm down with it. And then we have covered calls. That's probably the one they should start with there. That's been the primary use case for LEDGERX options pretty much since inception. They've said so many times here on the network. They also have other use cases, selling puts for income. So I like to see that. I like to see a focus on more education, because clearly we need a lot more of it there in the crypto options and derivative space. People forget, people coming to the crypto markets oftentimes have very little experience in traditional financial markets. This is new to them. So we need to really ease them down to the river before we can even get them to drink. So it's an intriguing thing, but looks like they are putting a lot more effort and resources into LEDGERX, which is really only a good thing. So I need to click through these markets a little more myself, Anders. I kind of been waiting myself to kind of let all the paint dry on this acquisition, but now that it seems like that is the case, I want to start digging around. In the past, the knock on LEDGERX was that they had some decent liquidity front month at the money and a little bit outside of that, and that was really about it. You couldn't really do much with it beyond that. It's hard to leg into spreads, for example, because the spreads were just a little wide on the two legs. You'd really get hit. And also the primary use case was covered calls. Once you got outside of that, there wasn't a lot available. But now it seems like that they have these resources. For example, they're pushing swaps here on the homepage now. And so it's just an interesting, different offering. They're talking more about things to do with the calls aside from just covered calls, which is a good trend as well. They're talking about the ETH options more, which I know will be interesting for a lot of you out there. So yeah, I need to sink my teeth into this new platform a little bit more myself. I think also that's a good reminder, Anders. I think it is time to get those folks back on the show so they can answer some of your questions themselves and explain why they acquired LEDGERX and what they plan to do with these new resources. I think it is an exciting option, pun intended, for a lot of you out there who've been waiting for something that is available for you here in the U.S. You listen to a show like this all the time. We're always talking about Deribit, but you can't access Deribit. I get it. So LEDGERX is your primary option, pun intended, really, unless you want to go the futures or futures options route with CME. So for a lot of you, you've been kind of pinning a lot of hopes on LEDGERX. And let's hope this new, not just coat of paint, but really these new resources, this new backing of this larger firm can really help that get off the ground. So great question, Anders. I think we'll be hearing more from those folks over there on the show in the future. All right, everybody, that music means we've come to the end of a Just the Facts Ma'am edition here of the Crypto Rundown. I want to thank our friends over there at Genesis Volatility, gvol.io, the place to go to kick the tires and light the fires. Remember, if you have a question, you're confused about any of this stuff, you have a product you see out there trading, maybe something going on in the options or the volatility that doesn't really make sense to you, send it in. We'd love to hear from you folks out there, see what you're worried about, what you're trading, what you have questions about. It always helps us to generate the show and also to choose the guests we want to bring on to talk to you folks out there. And of course, remember, if you haven't joined a Secret Club yet, got a great Q&A coming up tomorrow with Mr. Scott Nations, creator of a lot of interesting vol products you guys know and love out there. Of course, also author of one or two or maybe half a dozen books, including a new one coming out very soon that you folks will probably want to check out. Of course, coming up on Wednesday as well. For everybody out there on the on-demand side, if you want to join us live, join us in the Secret Club, of course. For Options Bootcamp, we'll be back live with Mr. Passarelli. Given the two-part episode we just did about all things volatility, I think maybe we need, given some of your questions, maybe we need to go in and explain a little bit about what's been happening recently with VXX. That product has kind of gone in a very different direction than a lot of people may have expected. And so probably worth a little bit of an explanatory episode maybe on that this week. Options Playbook Radio coming up after that as well. Thursday, we have, of course, TWIFO This Week in Futures Options, a show that if you're listening to this one, you should be checking out that show as well, because crypto does make it on that show quite a bit. In fact, we'll have CME coming on to talk about these micro Bitcoin options and micro ETH options on that program coming up very soon, so stay tuned for that. Of course, episode 2 of the Option Block Friday Volatility Views, and for all you Secret Club kids, you have Options Oddities after that. Then we're back again next Monday, another episode of the Crypto Rundown. Stay safe out there, everybody.
This program is brought to you by Genesis Volatility, also known as GVol, home of institutional-grade crypto options analytics. Whether you're trading CeFi options or DeFi options, cryptocurrencies move. Use GVol Analytics to analyze implied volatility, model realized volatility, structure positions, and unlock alpha. For more information, visit gvol.io. That's GVOL.io. You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network, the home of the Options Podcast. For more quality options programs, visit theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app available in the iTunes and Google Play stores. Select programs are also available via live stream at mixlr.com/options-insider. That's mixlr.com/options-insider. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, stocktwits.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.